Hey everybody, thank you for joining us today for morning prayer. Thank you for joining me for this reflection. Before we get into it, I want to share with you a joke that came my way through the comments. I believe it had something to do with my hairstyle. The joke is, what happens when the devil goes bald? There's hell to pay. You can blame a member of the choir for that one. Anyway, today we're talking from the first chapter of the Gospel of Mark. And in particular, this is where Jesus is beginning to put his team together. And it says he's walking along the Sea of Galilee, and he comes across a couple of fishermen, Andrew and Simon, and they're casting their nets into the sea. And he says, "You fish for fish? Well, I'm going to make you fish for people." And immediately it says they stop doing what they're doing and they follow him. And he comes across a couple of others, and he tells them to join him, and immediately they drop their nets and they follow him as well. It's a really powerful story. And it's a story that opens up a whole lot of questions, like what exactly did he say that they immediately stopped doing what they were doing to follow him? What was it about him? What was it that was going on for him? What was it that he was sharing? What was it that he was projecting? What were his exact words that led those people to stop everything they were doing, to give up their life and to follow him? Because, from the church's perspective, that's kind of been the thing that's been hammered home to us for the last few years, has been, this is about people giving up their life to follow Jesus. And I believe that. It's about giving up our ways to take on his way, to give up our path to walk his path, to give up what's most important to us and take on what is most important to Jesus. But I think where we go sort of astray is that idea of immediate. And especially, I think, in the sense of being a fisher for people. Because that sort of has some connotations to it, that the most important thing you're going to do is capture people for Jesus. That you're going to share the gospel and you're going to bring people to Jesus. And while that is certainly a part of this call, it is such a small part of the call. It's like where Jesus is saying this to these guys, he's giving them like the first chapter of the book of discipleship. And yet it seems sometimes that that's the place where we gravitate. That's the thing that we think is most important. When I first came into ministry, when I was first brought into this parish, filled with vim and vigor, it was all about let's build the church, let's build the church, let's build the church. And by the way, I'm still all about let's build the church. But my sense was to build the church meant more butts in the pews, more people in the building on Sunday mornings, more people coming, more energy being generated by those new people who are coming. And what I realized after a couple of years was we had all these new people come, but some people had left. Because there's certain physical limitations for people to be in a church, right? Like there are statistics that say your max capacity that you should ever hope to achieve is about 75%, because people don't like sitting too close together. And so as I began seeing those barriers sort of come into this parish, seeing them come to fruition in this parish, I began looking for ways to eliminate those barriers. And that's what I ended up spending my time on, was how do I make this a place where people want to be? How do I take away the barriers that are keeping them away? And then what you start doing is you start fiddling with the music, and you start fiddling with the liturgy, and you start fiddling with the service times, you start looking at the pews, where the pews are situated and how all that's going. You start looking at your sermons and what you're saying. And soon you realize you're on a path that you're no longer doing what you're supposed to do. You're treating this building, you're treating this congregation as though it were a restaurant, as though it were a club. Right? How do I increase capacity? How do I increase people's enjoyment of their time? The message has always been, share the gospel and make disciples. Share the gospel and make disciples. But when we take this line that I am going to make you a fisher of men too seriously, and by that I mean we make it our focal point, we make it the focal point of our mission in the world, it's not too hard for us to lose track of everything else that we're supposed to be doing, the core of what we're supposed to be doing. We're not just supposed to be putting people in our building. We're supposed to be sharing the gospel. Well, how do you share the gospel? Well, the first thing you need before you can share the gospel is a relationship. How do you build a relationship? Well, how do you build a relationship? You meet people. And you make it so that you act in a way that, they want to be around you. And you act in a way that you enjoy being around them. And you make it, you act in such a way that you enjoy learning about them and hearing their stories. And you take on some of their personality traits and their characteristics because you admire them. And you grow to love them. And as you grow to love them, some of them will grow to love you. And now all of a sudden you've got a relationship. And despite the fact that you've never actually shared the gospel of Jesus Christ verbally with these people, they have seen in you Jesus alive and at work. They've seen Jesus in the world through you. And so when it comes time for you to share your faith in a natural and an organic way, that isn't like slapping people over the top of the head with a Bible or doing a baptism with a squirt gun, they're ready for it. They want to hear what makes you the person that you are because you've listened and you've wanted to hear what makes them the people that they are. And that is still only chapter 1. Right? All you've done there is you've figured out how to do some fishing. But every time you change community, every time you change groups, that tactic, that methodology has to shift. And we haven't even gotten to the big part. The big part of that book, which is helping people live. Helping people learn how to live. Helping people grow into their role as a disciple. Jesus isn't lying when he says, I'm going to make you fishers of people. He isn't. And I'm not minimizing what he's saying. I'm saying we need to take it into the context of all that he would go on to tell us in this gospel and all the other gospels. All that he tells us about how to live, all that he tells us about how to lead, all that he tells us about how to love, all that he tells us about how to teach, right? And how to share this gospel and how to help people embrace their life as disciples. It's not just about the fishing. It's about so much more. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord's face be made to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord's countenance be lifted up to you, and may you always know the peace of being in the Lord's presence. And I pray that as you walk this path, you'll see how in-depth it is, how important it is, and how it's not just about any one particular aspect, but rather it's about the relationships. It's about the love. It's about the concern and the mercy and the compassion that you will share and that will be shared with you. Amen.